Midnight light on a dim-lit screen, clicking through stories you wouldn't believe. Cold case trails and courtroom scenes, whispers from the grave and media dreams. Truth is stranger, hearts beat faster, in the shadows of a news disaster. Scrolling deep where secrets hide, you found the stories time won't deny. Headstones and headlines, the tales collide. Justice and mystery, side by side. From backwoods clubs to breaking news lines, you shine a light where the silence lies. Oh, headstones and headlines, you dig where the truth won't die. Small town rumors and urban fear, a voice for the lost who can't speak here. Through every name, through every case, you hold the truth in a steady place. Cameras roll but justice lingers, truth unravels through careful fingers. You tell a story, speak their names in a world that's quick to look away. Headstones and headlines, the tales collide. Justice and mystery, side by side. From backwoods crimes to great night trials, you trace the echoes through every mile. Oh, headstones and headlines, you dig where the truth won't die. Some run from the dark, you walk right in with a question and a camera lens. It's not just a crime, it's the lives they led. The voice is still talking from the books unread. Headstones and headlines, the veil is thin. Truth gets louder when you begin. With every view, with every line, you bring the forgotten back alive. Oh, headstones and headlines, you dig where the truth won't die. Yeah, headstones and headlines, you tell the stories that time can't hide.
Good morning, everyone. Happy Monday. I hope everyone's having a good day so far, and I appreciate you being here, especially on short notice. I hadn't realized the trial for the father of Colin Gray was starting today, and so I decided, since I'm on break this week, I might as well cover the trial. Hopefully more people show interest in it. I know it's not my usual time, but I was planning on watching it anyways, so why not stream it and give others the opportunity to watch along with us. So, excuse me, the first thing that I wanted to do was to just give an overview of the case, and then we will get into the actual trial. It was supposed to start at 9 a.m. It didn't start until a little bit later than that. And I want to be able to skip over the breaks. So I think I'm in a good spot at this point where when they break, take a morning break, I will end this live at the lunch break and then come back, because I just don't feel there's any sense in just staying here for, I think they usually get like an hour to do that. That way we can go and do things that we might need to do. So I did see Pookie here. Anyone else who is in the bushes, thanks for being here. I do appreciate it. So let me add this. So as I said, I'm just going to read this article to kind of give us a refresher for those of us who were with me when I first covered this case, because it has been about a year and a half. It happened in September 2024. I believe actually that it was the first or second day of school, if I'm not mistaken, or it was the first or second week of school. I can't remember exactly, but I guess we'll get a refresher. So it says, opening statements begin in murder trial of father whose teen allegedly carried out mass shooting at Georgia High School. And Colin Gray is the dad. And this case, I believe, does parallel what happened with the Crumleys. I didn't cover, or I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. I didn't follow that case very closely, so I can't necessarily speak on the circumstances or what I feel should or shouldn't have happened. This case, though, I do have my opinions that I will hold until later. All right. So, opening statements began Monday morning in the trial of Colin Gray, the father of the teenager who allegedly killed 4 people at his Georgia high school in 2024, the latest case testing the limits of who is responsible for a school shooting. Gray, the father of Colt Gray, has pleaded not guilty to nearly 30 charges, including 2 counts each of second-degree murder and involuntary manslaughter. Opening statements are expected to be followed by witness testimony. The state has indicated it plans to seek testimony from members of Gray's family, shooting survivors, and behavioral health experts. The trial is expected to last about 3 weeks. So, with that, I go back to work next week. So, we will have to go back to what I normally do, which is, most likely cut it into each day into 2 parts. So, we'll be a little bit behind in this trial, but it is what it is. The case stems from the shooting at Apalachee High School in September 2024, when then 14-year-old Colt Gray allegedly used an AR-15 style rifle to kill 2 students and 2 teachers and injure 9 others. He ultimately surrendered to police and has admitted to the shooting, according to authorities. More than a year earlier, law enforcement had questioned the teen and his father about online threats to commit a school shooting, though no charges were filed. Even so, Colin Gray bought a firearm for his son as a Christmas present in December 2023, the same firearm he used in the mass shooting, according to 2 law enforcement sources with direct knowledge of the investigation. The indictment alleges Gray allowed his teenage son access to a firearm and ammunition after receiving sufficient warning that his son would harm and endanger others, actions that constitute criminal negligence by, quote, consciously disregarding a substantial and unjustifiable risk, end quote. This is what I agree with. The FBI had investigated Colt Gray based on a comment or comments that he had made online. Dad knew that even though the son denied doing what was clearly proven, he still bought his son a firearm. The trial is part of a broader push to hold more people accountable for a school shooting, including the shooter's parents and responding law enforcement officers. This case bears close similarities to the trials of James and Jennifer Crumley, whose then 15-year-old son killed 4 students in 2021 at his high school in Oxford, Michigan. The Crumley parents were each convicted of manslaughter and sentenced to 10 to 15 years in prison. Their son was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Colin Gray has remained behind bars since his arrest a day after the shooting. If convicted, he faces 10 to 30 years in prison on each murder charge and 1 to 10 years on each manslaughter charge. Colt Gray, now 16, has been indicted on 55 felony counts, including 4 counts of malice murder, according to court documents. He has pleaded not guilty, although a defense attorney last year raised the possibility he may change his plea. A trial date has not been set. What happened at the shooting? The mass shooting at Apalachee High School in Winder, Georgia, about 50 miles northeast of Atlanta, occurred the morning of September 4th, 2024. Colt left algebra class at 9:45 a.m., and gunshots were soon heard in a nearby classroom, a student told CNN at the time. The gun had been hidden in his backpack. The first report of an active shooter came in around 10:20 a.m., authorities said. So that was 30 minutes. I heard gunshots outside my classroom and people screaming, people begging not to get shot, said then 14-year-old student Macy Wright. And then people sitting beside me were just shaking and crying. Shoot, I think my mouse just died. Right. A resource officer confronted the shooter, who immediately surrendered and was taken into custody, Barrow County Sheriff Judd Smith said. The suspect told investigators, "I did it," while being questioned. Investigators with the Georgia Bureau of Investigation alleged the firearm used in the attack had been purchased by his father despite an earlier concern from law enforcement about the teen. Oh, look what advertisement is now showing up on my screen because we talked about it the other day. Hey dude footwear. Telling you, they're listening. Colin Gray had been questioned by law enforcement in May 2023 regarding, quote, several anonymous tips about online threats to commit a school shooting at an unidentified location and time, end quote, according to a joint statement from FBI Atlanta and the Jackson County Sheriff's Office. The online threats included photographs of guns. That I did not remember that detail. Colin Gray denied making the threats online, the statement said. Jackson County alerted local schools to continue monitoring the issue, but law enforcement did not have probable cause to arrest or take other actions. Colin Gray told officers he had guns in the house and his son had access to them. Video of the interview shows. We do a lot of shooting. We do a lot of deer hunting. He shot his first deer this year. I'm trying to teach him about firearms and safety and how to do it all and get him interested in the outdoors. And then that's what leads us to Dad now being on trial for what happened. Yeah, Pookie, I kind of thought it took a little bit longer, but I guess with, he's facing so many charges, I feel like this is pretty quick for a trial. And I wouldn't be surprised if Colt Gray takes a plea. But we'll see. We'll see. So we're going to get started. I will mute during the trial. As I said, during breaks, I will skip over them. And then once they break for lunch, I will end this live. And then I will come back around the time that they're supposed to come back. Just so that I can be a little bit behind, so that when they take the afternoon break or other breaks, I can just skip over it. So again, thanks for being here. Please do hit the like if you haven't already. And we're going to get this show on the road. I did skip over jury instructions. So this will be starting when opening statements begin. Ooh, what did I do? There we go.
All right, this is the exhibit I'm going to be showing. Thank you. Morning. Before we start, one thing needs to be abundantly clear. This is not a case about holding parents accountable for what their children do. That's not what this case is about. This case is about this defendant and his actions. His actions in allowing a child that he has custody over access to a firearm and ammunition after being warned that that child was going to harm others. This is a case about his actions and the horrific consequences of them. I'm going to take you now to September 4th, 2024. It was a Wednesday morning. It was just after the Labor Day holiday. A 14-year-old boy enters Apalachee High School here in Barrow County. It's a new school for him. In fact, he had been out of school completely the entire previous year. And while the school year was already a month old, this was only his 5th day attending school. As he walked through the crowded hallways, he carried his book bag in front of him. And hidden inside that book bag was a 6-hour M400 AR-style rifle. This 14-year-old boy has an evil plan. He goes to his first period class, located here. It's a computer science class. He sits down at the table, and he puts his book bag with the rifle next to him. At some point during the class, he gets up and approaches the teacher, and he asks her, "Y'all had any active shooter drills?" She says, "Yeah, actually, we had one last week. You were absent." He goes back and sits down. The teacher ponders on this a bit. It's not a question to ask. She doesn't know this boy very well. He's only been there 5 times. So she emails the school counselor, and she courtesy copies her direct supervisor, the vice principal, about the question the boy had asked. At the end of class, at 9:38, this boy picks up his book bag with the rifle in it, carries it in front of him out of the class, heading to his second period class. But that first period teacher stewed on it a little more, and between the class breaks, she decided, I'm going to go up to the office and find the vice principal and talk to her. But at this very moment, that 14-year-old boy is entering his second period class. It's 9:40 a.m. He takes a seat, and he puts that book bag with the rifle in it next to him. 14 minutes later, at 9:54 a.m., that boy gets up, grabs his book bag, and he tells the teacher, I'm going to go to the counseling office, which is located down here. He leaves the class, but he doesn't go down to the counseling office. He goes down what's called J Hall, and he enters the boys' bathroom here. He goes into a stall, locks the stall, and he hides there for the next 26 minutes. Now, 4 minutes before he left second period, at 9:50 a.m., the boy's mother calls the school counselor, who's in this week here. Now, the boy's mother doesn't live here in Winder. She's down in Fitzgerald, Georgia, which is in South Georgia. It's a 4.5-hour drive from here. But the boy that morning has sent some text messages that bother her. And he's now not answering his phone when they call or try and get a reply. She's worried about his emotional well-being. Now, the counselor had actually met this boy the week before. He had a panic attack at school, went to her office, and was too upset to go back to class. So the counselor and the mother talk on the phone for 8.5 minutes about this boy's emotional well-being. And at the very end of that call, at the end of the 8.5 minutes, for the first time, that mother mentions to the counselor that this boy has access to firearms. This sends a red flag up to the counselor. She immediately hangs up the phone and she calls the vice principal. This phone call was ended at 9:59 a.m. But remember, the boy had already left the classroom 5 minutes before that phone call ended. 5 minutes before the mother said anything about firearms. And he's hiding in this bathroom where no one knows where he is. 7 minutes after the call ends, at 10:06, the vice principal and the school resource officers arrive at the second period class. Now remember, this boy that the vice principal and the SROs are looking for has only been to that class 5 times. And there's another child in that class who has an almost identical name. And that boy has also left the classroom to actually go to the bathroom. He signed out to go to the bathroom. Second period teacher thinks that's who they're asking for and says he just went to the bathroom. Gives the vice principal that boy's backpack. And the vice principal and school resource officers head down to the bathroom to find that boy. That boy's just up in the sinks. He comes out with them, they talk to him, they search his book bag, and they realize this isn't the right kid. He doesn't have computer science for first period. They go back to the class. They arrive there at 10:11, back to the second period class. The teacher then tells them, oh, that child has gone to the counseling office. located here, because that's where he said he was going. Vice principal, school resource officers go to the counselor's office. Of course, they haven't seen him. He never made it there. At this point, they decide they're going to go look on the security cameras, see if they can locate this boy. They go down this hall, and it's not on this map. You'll see a more full map later. So around this area is where the vice principal's office is that has access to the security cameras. So they're about right here. At 10:18, the vice principal emails the second period teacher. When did he leave your class? They're trying to locate when exactly he left, because remember, this boy's only been there 5 days. They don't really know what he looks like. So they're trying to find him on video surveillance equipment. So she emails at 10:18, when did you leave your class? 2 minutes later at 10:20, second period teacher responds, he left towards the beginning of class. That's 10:20 a.m. when that email was sent. 1 minute later, at 10:21 a.m., that boy exits the bathroom he's been hiding in. He's now wearing yellow work gloves. He's carrying that 6-hour M400 AR style rifle concealed with a poster board. And he walks back down J Hall towards his second period class. Now, when the vice principal had left that class to go look for him in the counselor's office, she shut the door behind her, and the door automatically locked. This boy is not going to be able to get into his second period class. But next door was another classroom, right here. It was taught by Cassandra Ryan and Stephen Edwards. And inside that class were the following students: Landon Adams, Christian Angulo, Jackson Beaver, Hayden Bowen, Jalene Brady, Michaela Brown, William Carricker, Marquez Coleman, Melanie Delira Castaneda, Natalie Griffith, Taylor Jones, Kendez Lawrence, Martin Moreno Galdamez, Tyler Moon, Ariana Norman, Brittany Rubio, Mason Skirmerhorn, Ronaldo Vega, and Nautica Walton. At 10:20, Mason Skirmerhorn, who's in that room, leaves to go to the bathroom. And the door does not shut behind him. Mason goes down this hallway. He actually passes the shooter in the hallway, and Mason goes into the bathroom. The shooter goes to his second period class. The door's locked. He knocks on the door. A student in that class gets up, goes to the door to open it for him, but sees through the class at the last second him standing there with that rifle. She steps back from the door. At that exact moment, the teachers also reach the door because they've been looking for this boy, remember? And she sees through the glass him standing there outside their door with that 6-hour M400. She immediately presses a button on a lanyard that's around her neck that locks down the school. The boy then steps next door to the Ryan Edwards classroom, and he opens fire. He fires discriminately through the classroom. He hits the following victims: Melanie Delira Castaneda, seated here. This is the door he comes into. She's seated here. He strikes her in the left arm with a bullet. Natalie Griffith, seated here, strikes her in the shoulder, the upper arm, and the forearm. Taylor Jones, seated here, struck through the leg. Christian Angulo, seated here by the door. He shoots him through the wrist, into the chest. He would not survive. Jackson Beaver, Ronaldo Vega, and Nautica Walton were also in that room. They were struck by shrapnel from the bullets ricocheting around the room. When he finishes shooting, the shooter then leaves. He runs down J Hall. He's looking for more victims. Christina Earmy is a teacher in this classroom. She hears the commotion. She steps out, looks down the hall. The shooter is about here. He shoots her through the neck before she can get back in the room. She would not survive. Richard Aspinwall is coming out of this room on I Hall. He hears the commotion. Joining him is David Phoenix coming out of this room. The two of them start coming down the hall here. They don't get very far because the shooter has now reached this point. He turns his gun down this hallway and sends a hail of bullets towards them. As they dive towards their room, David Phoenix is shot in the hip and in the foot. Richard Aspinwall is shot in the side and the upper chest. He would not survive. The shooter continues down the hallway. He gets to here, tries to get in this door, it won't open. He turns back and heads this way. At this point, Mason Schermerhorn is still in that bathroom. He doesn't know what's happening. He comes out of the bathroom. He turns away from the shooter, doesn't even see him, heading back toward his second period class. The shooter takes aim from behind, shoots at him, but misses, hits the wall above and in front of Mason. This startles Mason, and he turns and runs the other way directly at the shooter. He's shot point blank range. He would not survive. Shooter's here. He then aims his gun down K Hall. And Zane Zinni is locked out of his classroom here. He's in the shooter's sights. Now, before the shooting started, two school resource officers, Donovan Boyd and Brandon King, were in the vestibule area, an atrium, I think they call it, in this area, right outside the vice principal's office. They're waiting for the vice principal to find this boy and go get him. They're waiting out there in the atrium, and they hear the gunshots coming from this side. And those two deputies ran towards the gunshots. They come down this hallway here, and they turn the corner, and they see the shooter here with his rifle aimed towards Zane Zinni. And they yell for him to drop the gun and get on the ground. And he complies before he gets a shot off at Zane Zinni. The officers rush down here, they secure him, and they secure that 6-hour M400 AR-style rifle. And out of his pockets, they find 3 more magazines loaded. Now remember when the shooter had tried to enter his second period class and the teacher pushed that button? Well, that sent an alarm. It immediately notified law enforcement all over the county. Within minutes, an enormous police and medical response descended upon that school. It was a dramatic and intense scene as the school was cleared and the wounded evacuated. But to make matters worse, they were getting additional threats, fake threats, about other shooters at all the other schools in the county. Law enforcement now had to be diverted to these other schools to clear them to make sure people were safe. Barrow County deputies Anthony Townsend and Brandon Bazinet were sent to clear Winder-Barrow High School here in Winder. Once they cleared it, then they went next door to Russell Middle School and cleared it. And just as they were finishing that up, they got a call from their superiors. I was trying to say superior and supervisor at the same time. Their superiors to go to a residence in Barrow County and secure it. They were just given an address. They don't know why they're going there. They're just told, go to this residence and secure it until other officers can arrive. Where they're going is the shooter's house. And when they get there, Colin Gray meets them in the garage. And without any prompting, because remember, they don't know why they're there. They don't know who this guy is. Without any prompting, he blurts out, I knew it. My little girl just texted me. She's in middle school. She said we're in lockdown. I'm like, God Almighty, please tell me your brother didn't do something. Agents with the Georgia Bureau of Investigations arrived shortly thereafter, and they begin a search of the house. And inside that house, in that 14-year-old boy's bedroom, on the wall, they find this shrine, for a better word. Those pictures are all of the same person, Nicholas Cruz. Nicholas Cruz was the person that in 2018 went into Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida, with an AR-style rifle. And there he killed 17 students and faculty and wounded another 17 more. Investigators look at this and they begin to wonder, who is this kid? His name is Colt Gray. He's the oldest son of Colin Gray. His mother is Marcy Gray. He has a younger sister named Jenny, who was 13 years old at the time of this incident. She was actually going to Heyman Morris Middle School, which is directly next door to Apalachee High School. He has a little brother, Coley, who was 8 years old, who was going to his elementary school. Now, Colt Gray, raised here in Barrow County, he went to Statham Elementary School up until fourth grade, up till the beginning of fourth grade. And in the beginning of fourth grade, he was withdrawn from Statham Elementary School because the family had moved to Gainesville. and he goes to White Sulphur Elementary School, but only for a few months. Because again, the family moved again. Now they moved to Cumming, and he goes to Chattahoochee Elementary School. But again, only for a few months. In March of 2020, they moved to Fitzgerald in Ben Hill County, Georgia. It's South Georgia, kind of east of Tifton. Because there, Marcy's mother and father, Deborah Polhamus and Charlie Polhamus, live, and Deborah Polhamus's mother, Marcy's grandmother, Colt's great-grandmother, had passed away and left the house. So there's an available house for them to live in. So they moved down to Fitzgerald on March 4th of 2020. But if you remember that day, that's the week before COVID shut everything down. That was the end of Colt's 4th grade year. 5th grade. Now this is going to be the fall of 2020 into the spring of 2021. That's 5th grade year. Colt goes to Ben Hill Elementary School. But remember, this is when COVID is raging, and it's mostly virtual. He's mostly at home using the school computers. The next year, 6th grade, fall of 2021, he starts a new school, Ben Hill Middle School, because he's in 6th grade now. And early in that year, 11-year-old Colt, at home, using the school computer, searches the word abuse. A few hours later, he searches the phrase, "how to kill your dad." That was on September 19th, 2021, 3 years before he took that rifle into Apalachee High School. School resource officers are sent to the house to check on him. Everything's fine. It was just a mistake. Misunderstanding. But a defects case is opened on the family. But the family leave Fitzgerald and move to Jackson County 6 weeks later in November of 2021. So in November, they come up here, Jackson County, Georgia. But they don't enroll the kids in school until February of 2022. Colt finishes out his 6th grade year at West Jackson Middle School. 7th grade, fall of 2020. 1 year after he searched How to Kill Your Dad, and 2 years before Apalachee, 12-year-old Colt starts Jefferson Middle School. It's his 7th school in 4 years. That Halloween, halfway through the semester, Marcy, his mother, gets drunk, passes out in the car in the driveway of the house. Jenny and little Coley are trick-or-treating, and they get separated. Coley gets lost. Authorities are called. Another defects case is opened on the family. Marcy and the 2 siblings, little Coley and Jenny, they move back down to Fitzgerald in November of 2022. But Colt stays up in Jackson County with the defendant. Defects caseworker Tamika Mitchum is monitoring Marcy and the 2 siblings down in Fitzgerald, and defects caseworker Michaela Anderson is monitoring Colt and the defendant up here in Jackson County. And starting in March of 2023, during his 7th grade year, Michaela Anderson visits his residence monthly. Every month, she shows up to check on Colt, see how he's doing, check on his well-being. And the defendant always says the same thing. Colt's doing well in school. He doesn't need any counseling. But that's not really true. Colt is full of intense anger, and he's having a hard time dealing with it. On Sunday, May 21st, 2023, this is the end of Colt's 7th grade year at Jefferson Middle School. In fact, classes had ended that Friday, and this is that Sunday. And on that Sunday, the Jackson County Sheriff's Office gets a tip from the FBI. There's an app that you can get on your computer called Discord. And this app is popular with video game enthusiasts, but it allows people from all over the world to talk to each other on the computer. And users in a chat room on this app, a true crime chat room, report to the FBI that another user is threatening to shoot up an elementary school. This user is threatening to do this. It says they have access to guns. It says they plan to do it within the next 2 years. The FBI passes this tip on to Jackson County because when you look at the IP address of that user, it comes back to a Colin Gray and an address in Jackson County. Deputy Justin Elliott and investigator Dan Miller go to that address. Now, the current resident of that address has 2 daughters, and they don't use Discord. But they're new to that address, and they keep getting the mail of the previous tenant, Colin Gray. Deputy Elliott and investigator Miller then go to his new address. They speak with the defendant at his house, and they tell him about this threat on Discord, and they ask him, does Colt have access to guns? Which he does. But the defendant says that he and Colt, they take this school shooting stuff very seriously. And Colt denies to these officers that it was him on Discord. He says his Discord account got hacked. The defendant makes no mention to these officers that less than 2 years before, Ben Hill officers had also been to his house when Colt searched how to kill your dad, also on a computer. But before they left, Investigator Miller asked the defendant to please restrict Colt's access to guns. Less than 3 weeks later, when DFACS agent Michaela Anderson goes back out to the house like she's been doing monthly to meet with the defendant, and again, she asks, how's Colt doing? He makes no mention to her of this visit from the sheriff's office. 2 weeks after that, on June 23rd, the defendant signs a lease to move out of Jackson County into Winder. But he doesn't tell Michaela Anderson he was planning on doing that, and he never tells DFACS that he did do that. She just keeps going to an empty house. 2 months later, in August, it's time for another school year. Colt's not at Jefferson Middle School anymore. 13-year-old Colt is enrolled at Heyman Morris Middle School. This is the middle school in Winder that's directly next door to Apalachee High School. This is supposed to be his 8th grade year. But he's withdrawn from that school 3 days later. He never attends it. Instead, Colt goes back down to Fitzgerald to live with his mother, Marcy. And while he's in Fitzgerald, Colt is still filled with anger. He's still having trouble dealing with it. He's becoming violent. He breaks windows. He cuts up things with a knife. He even starts cutting on himself with that knife. These are the scars from after he was arrested after the shooting a year later. Colt's grandfather, Charlie Polhamus, is at his wit's end. He actually calls the police on Colt. And at the beginning of October 2023, just a few weeks after being in Fitzgerald, Colt comes back up here to Winder to live with the defendant. But he does not attend school. 2 weeks later, on October 13th, down in Fitzgerald, Marcy, who you remember still being checked on by DFACS, tests positive for drugs. She's going to lose the kids. DFACS worker Tamika Mitchum, who's been monitoring Marcy, calls the defendant, tells him to come down to Fitzgerald to pick up the other 2 kids, Jenny and Colby, and bring them back up. He now has sole custody of the 3 kids. Marcy's to have no unsupervised contact. But Tamika Mitchum also stresses to the defendant to get the kids in school and counseling as soon as possible. He does neither of these things. 3 weeks after the kids are brought up here, on November 6th, 2023, back down in Fitzgerald, Marcy basically goes crazy. She wants to come up to Winder. She wants her mother, Deborah Polhamus, to bring her to Winder. And Deborah Polhamus says, you ain't going to Winder. So Marcy duct tapes her mother to the chair, steals her car, drives up to Winder, goes to the defendant's house, keys his truck, and gets arrested. She spends some time in the Bexar County Jail before she's transferred to the Ben Hill County Jail for the charges down there. And while she's down there, she's released on bond to an inpatient drug treatment facility in South Georgia. She has no supervision during this time over Colt. Now back up here in Barrow County, it's been a chaotic few months for Colt. But that Christmas, after the cuttings and the things with the Jackson County and the moms going crazy, testing positive drugs, that Christmas, the defendant, 7 months after he was told by Jackson County Sheriff's Office of possible school shooter threats and being asked to restrict Colt's access to guns, the defendant buys and gives 13-year-old Colt that 6-hour M400 as his Christmas present. And he allows Colt to keep this rifle propped up in Colt's room. Now in February of 2024, 2 months after this Christmas, in February, Colt's siblings, Jenny and Coley, are finally enrolled in school. They've already missed 4 months of school, but they're finally enrolled. Colt does not attend. He misses the entirety of his 8th grade year. But during that spring, when Colt's not in school, the defendant continues to buy accessories for his Christmas present rifle. He buys a Sightmark Ultra Shot sight to go on the rifle. He buys a bungee sling to go for the rifle. He buys an accessory rail set. He buys a 45-degree offset iron sights. And he buys a lot of ammunition. That summer, 2024, Colt is now 14. It's just a few months before he takes his Christmas present rifle into Apalachee High School. July 6th of that summer, Marcy gets out of rehab in Fitzgerald, and the defendant picks her up and brings her back up to Winder. It's her first contact with Colt in 9 months. Now, Colt, who had always been quick to violence and suffered from severe anxiety, begins to spiral out of control. He's fighting with his father. He's throwing things at people. He's putting holes in his sister Jenny's door. But the rifle stays in his room. On July 20th, Colt has a panic attack at the house. He comes in the living room and he actually asks his parents to call 911 for him. But they don't call anyone. His mental health becomes so bad that the defendant and Marcy together begin giving Colt Marcy's prescription for Zoloft. They're just giving it to him themselves. They worry he's suffering from depression, but they don't take him to see a doctor. It's around this time that Colt puts those pictures of Nicholas Cruz, the Parkland shooter, up in his room. And the rifle stays in his room. August 14th, 2024, 3 weeks before the shooting. It's Colt's first day of Apalachee. School had started 2 weeks earlier, but this was Colt's first day. He missed the first 2 weeks. He had not been inside of school for 15 months, not since the sheriff's office came to his door about the threats to shoot up a school. And that morning, Colt again is spiraling out of control. He sends a text message to the defendant at 6:49 a.m. He writes, "I'm sick of your shit. This is the fucking end for you. You fucking caused this." 2 minutes later, at 6:51 a.m., he sends this text message to the defendant. "Whenever something happens, just know the blood is on your hands." His first day of school. And the rifle stays in his room. The very next day, August 15th, Colt skips school. He gets into a fight with his mother, Marcy, when she goes into his room to try and get the rifle away from him. With rifle in hand, he shoves his mother to the ground and she hits her head on the wall. She then asks the defendant to please take Colt's rifle and lock it up. He never does. Marcy then has had enough. She goes back to Fitzgerald, once again, leaving Colt into the care of the defendant. And the rifle stays in his room. The next day, after this altercation with his mother, Colt asks the defendant to get him 150 rounds of ammunition. The defendant responds to him, well, he needs to pay for everything first, but he will. He will. Now, Marcy's down in Fitzgerald, the defendant's up here, but they're still communicating with each other by phone and text. And they begin to worry that Colt needs to be institutionalized. He needs to go to an inpatient facility. He's so bad. They search for places and resources, but the defendant never follows through. He never takes Colt to see any professional, and the rifle stays in his room. August 26th, 9 days before the shooting, Colt has another panic attack, this time at school. It's one I referred to earlier in the opening. It's only his 4th day he attended school. Remember, he missed the first 2 weeks of school, and he skipped school 5 of the next 8 days. Colt leaves his second period class that day. He goes to the counselor's office. He's too distressed to go back to class. They call his father, but his father can't come to get Colt. Colt ends up spending the entire school day in the counselor's office. That night, on the phone, Colt asked his grandmother, Deborah Polhamus, if he did something terrible, would she still love him? This bothered her so much, Deborah Polhamus, that the next morning she drives up to Winder from Fitzgerald. And on the way, she calls Advantage Behavioral Health Systems. It's a crisis stabilization inpatient place in Athens, Georgia. She talks to them on the phone, and they tell her he must be brought in by a parent. Marcy's in Fitzgerald. The defendant is here. They tell her that Saturday is a great day to come in, because most people don't realize they're actually open on Saturdays, and you can just walk right in. But he needs to be brought by a parent. Deborah asked the defendant to take Colt on that Saturday, which would have been August 31st. He doesn't. Wednesday, August the 28th, Colt skipped school. This is 2 days after that panic attack, the day after Deborah Polhamus is called crisis advantage behavioral. Colt tells the defendant that he hears voices telling him what to do. This is 3 days before the defendant is supposed to take Colt to advantage behavioral, and 1 week before the shooting. At 7:44 a.m. that morning, Colt texts the defendant, I have to kind of dance around the inconvenient truth at times. I have no control over what these things say and tell me to do. And the rifle stays in his room. Colt skipped school again the next day, which is a Thursday. That Friday and Monday, school is closed for the Labor Day holiday. And that Tuesday, September 3rd, Colt skipped school again. That brings us back around to that Wednesday morning, September 4th, 2024. Those pictures of Nicholas Cruz are still on his wall, and that rifle is still in his room. The defendant leaves to take little Coley to school. Jenny leaves on her bus for Heyman Morris Middle School, which again is directly next door to Apalachee High School. Colt gets his rifle, gets extra magazines, puts them in his book bag. He wraps a poster board around the part of the rifle that sticks out of the bag, and he takes a hat with a Fender guitar logo on it, a stocking hat, and puts it over the top so you can't see it. And then he heads out to meet the bus. A few hours later, just like he'd been warning he was going to do, Colt murders 4 people. Now, after the shooting, which I'll remind you happened at 10:22 a.m. So after that, at 11:01 a.m., Jenny, the daughter, texts her father. 3 people are dead at the high school. The defendant texts back a minute later, how do you know? How do you know? She responds, people are saying, and there was an email. Please, I'm scared. She then texts the defendant, I can't call you. I'm in a lockdown. At 12:19, the defendant texts Jenny. Jenny, have you talked to your brother? Jenny replies, no. But I think we're thinking the same thing, and I don't want to talk about it over text. 1 minute later, the defendant replies, yep, 10-4. I'll be here in just a few. Let me know when you get back in the building and when I can come get you. A few minutes later, the defendant arrives at his home, not Jenny's school, not Apalachee. He goes home, and he runs straight to Colt's room. He has to confirm what he already knows. He goes straight to Colt's room to see if that gun is missing. And it is. Moments later, Anthony Townsend and Brandon Bazinet arrive at his house, and he utters those words, I knew it. Now, ladies and gentlemen, the charges in this case, it's the same acts that he did. The charges are divided up between whether or not the victim of those acts was a child or an adult. If they're a child, the charges that stem from their victimization would be cruelty to children, because you have to be under 18 for cruelty to children to apply. But through his negligence of allowing Colt to have this gun, knowing what Colt was going to do, he caused cruel and excessive physical pain to the children. That's cruelty to children, second degree. If that cruelty to children in the second degree results in death, like with Mason Schermerhorn and Christian Angulo, that is murder in the second degree. So the cruelty and the murder in the second go together. They apply to the children. 2 adult deceased, Christina Irmy and Richard Aspinwall. They're above the age of 18. The defendant is charged with reckless conduct, same act, recklessly allowing his child, and he knew this was going to happen, to harm someone else. And because they died during the commission of reckless conduct, that is involuntary manslaughter. So for the adults, it's involuntary manslaughter based on reckless conduct. All the other children who were either struck by a bullet or in that Ryan Edwards classroom when the bullet started flying, they're the victims of charges for cruelty to children in the second degree, either by the physical pain it caused or the emotional anguish it caused. And the adults that were injured or put in harm's way, David Phoenix, Stephen Edwards, and Cassandra Ryan, those 3 adults, they're the victims of the reckless conduct. Now, at the end of the case, we'll come back before you and ask you to render the verdict of guilty.
Mr. Hobbs. Thank you, Judge. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen.
Before we talk about evidence, before we talk about the law, we have to begin with what every person in this courtroom already knows. What happened at Apalachee High School was tragic. It was horrific, it was terrifying, and it was heartbreaking. Nothing said in this courtroom can change that. Nothing that I'm going to say is meant to diminish that. You're going to hear emotional testimony, you'll see photographs, you'll see videos, you'll hear about the fear, the chaos, and the terror that Colin Gray inflicted on that school in this community. But your job is not to decide whether or not that was tragic. We all know that it was. Your job is to decide something much more specific. Your job is to decide whether or not Colin Gray knew what Colt was going to do. Because the state is not just prosecuting the shooter in this case, they're prosecuting the father as well. I want you to remember something as we begin. The courtroom is not a place where we punish people because we're angry, where we punish people because we're grieving. It's not a place where we punish people because we feel someone has to pay. This is a place where we follow the law. And the law requires proof, and the law requires evidence. And the law requires that the state prove its case beyond a reasonable doubt. That burden never shifts, not for a single moment. The state's theory will be simple. They'll tell you that Colin Gray allowed his son access to firearms and ammunition. Colin Gray had warning signs, and then Colin Gray, knowing that these were warning signs, consciously disregarded those warning signs. That he should have known his son would, not could, that his son would harm someone. And because the son later committed this school shooting, therefore Colin Gray must be guilty, must be criminally negligent, because he knew this would happen. That's their theory. But what you'll learn from the evidence is that case is not that simple. The evidence will show a teenager who is struggling mentally, a teenager who is deceptive, a teenager who hid his true intentions from everyone, from his family, from his counselor, from his siblings, from DFACS, from law enforcement, and most especially from his father. The evidence will show a father who did not ignore his child. He did not abandon his child. He did not turn his back on his child. The evidence will show between Colin Gray and Colt Gray daily contact, daily effort, and active steps by Colin Gray to seek mental health intervention for his son through the school. The evidence will show that the most important facts, the planning of this shooting, the concealment of this shooting, and the timeline of this shooting were hidden by Colt Gray from his father. That's the difference between tragedy and criminal liability. And this case is about whether the state can prove criminal liability by showing that Colin Gray knew that Colt was going to do this, knew that Colt was going to harm someone else. You cannot hold someone criminally responsible for failing to predict what was intentionally hidden from them. You'll learn about Colt Gray's state of mind that at the time no one knew. You will learn that months before the shooting, Colt had notes hidden on his cell phone from April of 2024, private notes that appear to be the planning stages of this shooting. Those notes were not known to Colin Gray. Those notes were not shared with Colin Gray. There's no evidence of that. You will learn something else. The plans reflected in those notes show that the shooting was initially planned for February of 2025 to coincide with the anniversary of the Parkland High School shooting committed by Nicholas Cruz. The plan reflected in those notes was that that time was going to be when the shooting happened, not in September of 2024. Something changed. The evidence will suggest and support that Colt accelerated his plan. And there's evidence suggesting that that acceleration was tied to the fact that Colin Gray was actively seeking mental health treatment for his son through the school at that time. There are emails to the counselor. There was paperwork he filled out. There was already in motion, already in place, an appointment for Colt to meet with the counselor and to meet with a mental health specialist the very next day, September 5th. Colin Gray did not know about the plans. Colin Gray did not know that Colt was planning to do this and that he would in fact go harm someone else. The behavior that Colt exhibits, the behavior that you'll find from his notes in his cell phone, from his text messages, show that he was actively keeping this information from others, from law enforcement, from DFACs, from counselors, from professionals who know to look for these signs, and most especially from his dad. The state will point, and they've already mentioned to you, an incident in May of 2023 when two Jackson County sheriffs went to Mr. Gray's home to talk to Colt. Fortunately, this interaction is on body-worn camera video, so you'll get to see the whole episode. You will see that Colin Gray is cooperative. You'll see that he brings his son out. He tells the officers that he takes this kind of thing seriously. He tells the officers, you tell me that he did it and those guns are gone today. That is on video. That is undeniable. But the officers don't tell him that. The officers say that they're not sure that it was him that made the threat. He tells the officers that he has a gun in the home. He says that he has a son who is somewhat isolated, who's on the computer a lot. He says that when he was young, he used to enjoy hunting with his father, that they would go deer hunting. And so he was introducing Colt to deer hunting, that they had gone out a year before. Colt had killed his first deer, that the gun that they had was for deer hunting. The gun was to get him outside, which the officer in the video approves of. Get him away from the computers. That's good. But Colin tells the officers, if you think this is him, tell me, because those guns are gone today. And that is not what he's told. It shows that Colin, had he known, would have removed those guns, but he didn't. Let's talk about what Colin actually did, because this case is being framed as if Colin Gray didn't do anything. The evidence will show the opposite. You will hear that when the family transitioned schools, it was Colin Gray who registered Colt. You will hear that Colin Gray worked full time, was raising 3 kids on his own due to his mother's, the kids' mother's addiction problems, due to DFAC saying that she was not allowed to have unsupervised contact with him, due to the courts in Barrow County saying she was not even allowed in the same county where these kids lived. Colin was doing everything. Colin is the one that filled out the counseling referral forms. Colin is the one that communicated with the school counselor. Colin's the one who discussed the evaluation. Colin was the one who was coordinating mental health services through the school. Colin is the one that filled out the paperwork to get the assessment done on September the 5th. You'll hear that the school had arranged, and it had already been taken care of, that Colin had completed everything he needed to for the assessment. You're going to hear from the grandmother who says that they wanted to take him to Advantage Behavioral in Athens, that it was urgent. This comes out after the shooting. The grandmother will also tell you she had absolutely no idea that Colt had any interest in Nicholas Cruz or school shootings in general until after the shooting happened and they were making the 4.5-hour trip from Fitzgerald, her and her daughter Marcy, at which point Marcy said, well, Colt does like this school shooter named Nicholas Cruz. That's the first time that you hear Debbie learns any of that. You're going to see text messages from Debbie in August and September of 2024 when she says that they were so strongly trying to get him into a facility. What you're not going to see in those text messages is any urgency on Debbie's part. You're not going to see anything from Debbie saying, get the guns out of the house. You're not going to say anything from Debbie saying, I'm worried about Colt. We need to get him there today. Nothing. They don't talk about it at all. Debbie doesn't mention it one bit. Now, she mentions it in hindsight after the fact, and Marcy does the same thing. Who was Colin Gray? He's a working father raising 3 kids by himself. He had responsibilities. He had a job. He had a family to keep afloat. He had 2 other kids besides Cole. He was involved. You'll see his text messages to his children. You'll see his text messages to Colt. This is not a parent who's turning his back on what's going on right in front of him. Let's talk about what you're not going to hear. Because sometimes what you don't hear in a case like this is just important as what you do. Sometimes the absence of evidence tells you more than the evidence itself. You will not hear a text message where Colt says to his dad, I'm going to shoot a school. I'm bringing a gun tomorrow. I have a plan. I'm going to hurt someone. You won't see a single message like that. You will not hear that Colt ever told his father about the notes on his iPhone. You will not hear that Colt ever showed his father a plan. You will not hear that Colt told his father he was accelerating the plan. You will not hear that anyone called Colin Gray and said, your son is about to commit a shooting. You will not hear that law enforcement told him your son made a credible threat. You will not hear a school official warn him his mental health treatment is imminent. He needs to see someone today. You will not hear anyone from DFACS told him we have serious concerns that he's violent, that he's going to hurt someone else. You will not hear anyone say that they contacted the police on September 3rd and said there's a school shooting about to happen. You will not hear that Colin Gray encouraged violence. You will not hear that he glorified violence. You will not hear that he dismissed a specific credible threat. In fact, you'll hear something entirely different. You'll hear that Colt suffered from anxiety. You'll hear that Colt suffered from depression. You'll hear about his panic attacks. You'll hear that he didn't like going to school. These are serious issues, but these are not the same as homicidal ideations. These are not the same as suicidal ideations. These are not the same thing as proof of a probable school shooting. The state will ask you to connect dots after the fact using hindsight, dots that became visible only after the shooting itself. But what you will not hear is evidence that at the time, Colin had sufficient warning that this outcome was probable, not imaginable, not possible, but probable. That Colin knew that his son would harm someone else. You'll hear testimony from Colt Gray's counselor. And that's important because it gives you a professional's perspective on what was going on with Colt in the weeks leading up to the shooting. You will hear that Colt presented as a student suffering from anxiety and emotional instability, panic symptoms, and inability to function in class. You'll hear something very important. You will hear that even the school counselor, a professional trained, did not perceive Colt as a threat. She described him as nice, respectful. That matters, because if a trained counselor did not perceive the imminent violence, then it's unreasonable to claim that the father should have seen it himself. You'll also hear testimony from her about how the father did in fact take steps to get him mental health treatment. The father was in communication with the counselor. The father submitted the paperwork. The father completed the referral, and the father was pursuing intervention. You'll hear the therapist was essentially scheduled to meet with Colt the very next day. The father was not ignoring the problem. Colin Gray was acting. They want you to hold him responsible because they don't think he was acting fast enough. You'll hear from his daughter, Colt's sister, Jenny Gray. Her testimony will corroborate the concealment that Colt was perpetrating on his family, on his dad. She'll testify that Colt was secretive, that he was constantly deleting and opening new accounts on Discord to avoid detection, that he was using usernames that were combinations of alphanumeric combinations. You'll find that he would not discuss, based on the statement that Jenny gave on September 4th of 2024, that he would not discuss school shootings or school shooters in front of his father. You will hear in the morning of the shooting, Colin Gray had already left home. You will hear that Colt, when he did discuss school shooters with Jenny, made her promise not to tell his dad. You'll hear that that morning on September the 4th, Colin Gray got up and took his youngest son, Coley Jr., to school, that he left before Jenny and Colt did to catch the bus. You will hear that Colt had to go and find the gun because it wasn't in his room, that he had to find the ammunition that wasn't in his room, that he had to put them in his backpack, and that he had to conceal the rifle that stuck out of his backpack 18 to 24 inches with a poster board. And he put a hat on top of it. It proves concealment, it proves independent action, and that matters because it's consistent with what Colt had done the whole time, which was conceal this plan from his father. Remember, the state says that he knew. They said that he knew this was going to happen. That he knew, not that it was possible, that he knew Colt was going to go and harm someone else. But you can't consciously disregard a risk that you're not aware of. And you can't say something is probable when it's being hidden from you. You're going to see text message. They've already discussed some of the messages. We're going to discuss some of the other ones. We're going to talk about why they matter. There are hundreds of text messages between Colin Gray and his son. These texts matter because they show the reality in real time of what was happening and what Colin would have thought and what Colin would have known at that time. Not now, but at that time. They also show what Colt chose not to disclose. You'll see a father checking on his son on a daily basis, checking on school attendance. Did you make it to school? How's your day going? How was your day? What are you doing after class? You'll see encouragement. I'm proud of you. I love you. You're a good young man. This is not an absent father. This is not a father not paying attention to his child. You'll see daily involvement. You'll see a father trying to keep a teenager engaged and connected to school. You'll see a father trying to build the confidence and self-esteem of his son. You will see this all in the text messages. You'll see their discussions about mental health, about depression, which is not homicidal ideation, about anxiety, which is not homicidal ideation, about anxiety, panic attacks, which are not homicidal ideation. You'll see a father trying to stabilize a situation at home. You will not see threats to harm other folks. You will not see threats to harm other people. You will not see, I'm going to shoot up the school. I'm bringing a gun. I have a plan. I'm going to harm someone. There needs to be proof that Colin Gray knew what Colt was going to do and knew that Colt was going to harm someone. The text messages show something else as well. They show that Colt was capable of living a double life. He could text his father, love you, and have a good day, while simultaneously writing plans on his phone about shooting up the school. He could talk about liking school. School was good. The kids here are mature, referring to the Apalachee High School. They gave me a nickname. The teacher said I'm the tech guy. And you'll hear Colin respond happily that his son seems to be finding his way for the first time in a while in school. He could talk, Colt, about school being good, about having a good day, and what they're going to have for dinner, while also planning on how to sneak a rifle into the school. That's not something a father can foresee. He asked about ammunition. You'll hear evidence that they went to the gun range. You'll hear evidence that he taught his son safety. You will not hear evidence that Colt requested ammunition because he was getting ready to do a school shooting. That conversation is not a threat. There's no mention of harming anyone else. There's no talk of a timeline. The state's going to ask you to interpret these ordinary messages with extraordinary hindsight. But the law does not allow hindsight convictions. You're tasked with determining what Colin Gray knew in the months leading up to the shooting. It requires proof of what he specifically knew at that time. You'll hear from the mother, Marcy Gray. She'll try to convince you that she warned everyone and no one listened. The evidence will show that she did not share the most important information she knew about Colt with Colin. You've already heard the relationship was not smooth. You heard that DFACS took the kids from her. You'll hear that they were separated. You'll hear that the kids had to come up here for the DFACS order. You'll hear that she drove up here. After telling her mother she was going to murder Colin, came up here, keyed his cars, got arrested, and then was told by the judge, you can't come back to Barrow County. You'll see evidence in text messages between Colt and his mom. You will see in these text messages, Colt telling his mom prior to the shooting that he had created a Securus online profile that he was using by making up a fake age to try and get in contact with Nicholas Cruz in prison down in Florida. He will text her that he had emailed Nicholas Cruz a couple times, and he'd even put money on his commissary. Marcy's response is to ask him where he got the money. And he tells Marcy in a text message, I told Dad it was to buy a video game on Steam. To which Marcy responds with a laughing out loud emoji. Marcy knew that he had this interest in Nicholas Cruz, but she did not share it with Colin. Immediately after this conversation, you will not see a text message from Marcy to Colin say, hey, did you know he's been emailing a mass murderer in Florida? Did you know that he put money on this mass murderer's commissary account that he told you was for a video game? She doesn't share any of that with Colin. She keeps that to herself. She does not reply immediately after to Colin or tell him, hey, this is what's going on. We got to get the guns out of the house now. No, she responds with a laughing out loud emoji. That's how serious she took it. She didn't think anything was going to happen. Remember, the evidence will show that even she, with the information that he did not have, did not believe there was an imminent threat and did not believe that Cole would harm anyone else. She didn't call law enforcement. She didn't seek an emergency mental health evaluation. And you'll hear evidence that after the shooting, her conduct is inconsistent with what she tells the police. You'll hear evidence that even after the fact, she's still trying to assist him in contacting school shooters and amplifying his profile across true crime community websites. And that matters because credibility matters and bias matters. You'll see that the state is asking you to convict Colin largely based on a hindsight narrative provided by witnesses who are not credible, that did not recognize the warning signs in real time. You will hear from the victims in this case. Their testimony it'll be emotional. And it's important to understand what happened inside that school. But respectfully, their testimony will not establish what Colin Gray knew and didn't know. They can't tell you what was said in the home. They can't tell you what was concealed. They can't tell you what was sent in text messages. And they can't tell you what warnings were communicated to Colin Gray. We're not going to dispute the horror of what happened. We're not going to dispute that they were harmed, that they were physically harmed and mentally harmed. But that's not proof that he was negligent. That is not proof that he knew what was in Colt's heart, that he knew what Colt was planning, and that he knew that Colt was going to harm someone else. The law doesn't punish what is possible. The law does not punish what is conceivable. He is charged with knowing what would happen. He is charged with knowing his son would harm someone else. In life, almost anything is possible. It's possible that a teenager who's angry might get into a fight. It's possible that a teenager who's depressed might run away or make up excuses not to go to school. It's possible that a teenager who's anxious might break something or act out. But this is not a case about whether something bad is possible. This is a case about whether or not Colin Gray knew Colt was going to take a gun to that school and harm other people. That matters because if the standard becomes it could have happened, then the law becomes limitless. If the standard becomes you should have imagined the worst, then every parent becomes criminally liable for what a teenager might do. But that's not the standard. The standard is proof. Proof that Colin Gray knew, that he consciously disregarded. Not a vague fear, not a general worry, but a risk that made this tragedy. That he knew Colt was going to go to that school. That he knew what the counselor didn't, what the DFACS professionals who had met with Colt didn't. The state will ask you to look at the outcome and then work backward to say, because this happened, it must have been foreseeable. But the law doesn't allow hindsight to substitute for evidence. That's why you're going to hear about what was actually known at that time, and most importantly, what was actually hidden from Colin Gray at that time. Because when someone conceals a plan, deceives the people around them, acts independently, the law does not allow us to pretend that the people left behind should have seen through all of it. They're going to say that common sense means you should have seen this coming. And guns are serious, and this tragedy is serious. But the law is serious too. This case is not about whether or not firearms are dangerous in the abstract. It's about whether Colin Gray, based upon what he actually knew, failed to act because he knew that his son was going to go to that school and commit these acts. In a case like this, there's a natural human instinct. When something this awful happens, we want an explanation. We want someone to blame. We want a story that makes sense so that we can take steps to make sure something like this never happens again. It's very easy and it's very human to look at the end result and believe that someone somewhere must have known. But the evidence in this case is going to show something that's deeply uncomfortable. Sometimes the truth is that the person who committed the act was hiding it. Sometimes the truth is that a family can be struggling, a child can be spiraling, and people can try to get that child mental health help. And still, something unthinkable can happen. It's not satisfying and it doesn't give anyone peace. But the criminal courtroom is not here to provide a scapegoat. It's here to provide justice. Being a juror, providing justice, that requires discipline. It requires that we do not convict someone because we're horrified. It requires that we do not convict someone because we wish they would have seen it coming. It requires that we do not convict someone because we feel like there must be some accountability somewhere. The state has chosen to put the father on trial for what the son did. And at the end of this case, you'll be asked to decide whether the state has proven beyond a reasonable doubt that Colin Gray knew his son would go to that school and commit these violent acts. And at the end of this trial, you will find that the state cannot prove that beyond a reasonable doubt. And we will ask you to return the only verdict that the evidence can support, which is not guilty on all counts for Colin Gray. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, before the first witness is called, we can go ahead and take a 10 to 15 minute restroom break.
Okay, so they are going to take a break. So we will skip over their break. It looks like they might actually still be on break. So we're actually caught up with where they're at now. So we'll just take a little break with them and see how far they get through the witnesses. And then I did already schedule, excuse me, the second live stream for this afternoon. Right now, I have it scheduled for 1 p.m. Eastern. However, depending on when they break for lunch, that may change because I will change the time until, what am I trying to say? Until then. Sure, Nanny, what's your question? The one thing, I tried to take notes as they were talking, but there's just so much information in both opening statements that I just couldn't keep up. So one thing that I am going to do later is to actually write down all of the dates, the times, etc. And I'm going to have either Gemini or ChatGPT create a visual timeline for me that I'll share with you, because I just feel like there was especially the day of the shooting, there was so much going on that, I mean, there was no way they could prevent it. However, the fact that they knew it was Colt when it happened, like that was the first thing they thought, that tells me something. That tells me that they had an idea that this could happen. So with the defense saying, you know, Colin couldn't have known this is what his son was going to do at this time on this day, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. No, he didn't know the specific time and place. However, I feel like after the FBI visited your home and said these statements were sent from your IP address, and then, you know, your kid says, oh, my account was hacked. Well, so it was only hacked because the FBI showed up? Like, my parents would have me on lockdown for sure. And they definitely would not have bought me that weapon. No way. Sunnyside, he was 14 when it happened. Colt was 14 when it happened. And this was September 4th, 2024. Nanny says, is it that he knew he would go to the school and do that, or that he likely would go? So the jury instruction, they have not gotten the jury instructions yet. I did listen. The judge went over the charges and then gave just a background of what happened. And then he just told them, you shouldn't be talking to anyone outside the jury room. You should keep your opinions to yourself until, deliberations, et cetera, et cetera. You know what? Since we're waiting, they're on a break. Let's go back and actually listen just to the beginning of the jury instructions, just to see what the judge said. Doodle says this one is tougher than the other one. Yeah, because the other one I had seen you say the son had told the mom that he was hearing voices or something, right? And the mom got him the weapon anyways. Like, I remember them taking him to the shooting range. I remember that part of the trial, but I didn't follow it very closely. I agree, the gun should have been removed and locked up. I agree.
You might settle down very quickly.
And it sounds like they're coming back, but let me just go back through these. Why isn't mom being held responsible too? She didn't buy the weapon for him. She didn't buy the weapon for him after knowing everything the dad knew prior. Oh yeah, so we can go back. So let me just check the timestamp here. Well, I guess it doesn't matter. I can find it. All right, so let me go back to, we'll go back to the judge's opening stuff, and then we'll go back to witness testimony. Oh, and we can get closed captioning now. All right, there we go. Love it.
Later on, that way you can stand up. It'll be a little easier for you to get up and down as you need to during the course of the trial, okay? All right, so ladies and gentlemen, the first thing I'm going to need to during the course of the trial, okay? All right, so ladies and gentlemen, the first thing I'm going to do is give you your trial oath. If you will stand and raise your right hand. All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, you shall well and truly try the issue formed upon this bill of indictment between the state of Georgia and Colin Gray, who is charged with multiple offenses that I'll review with you in just a minute, and a true verdict give according to the evidence. So help you God. Please swear or affirm. Swear. All right, all were sworn. Thank you. Be seated. So, ladies and gentlemen, your service is about to begin in earnest. Thomas Jefferson once said, "I consider trial by jury as the only anchor yet imagined by man, by which a government can be held to the principles of its Constitution." What I'm going to do next is give you some preliminary jury instructions. I know some of you have never served on a jury, so listen to these and let them guide you as you consider the evidence in the case. So you have been sworn in and paneled, and you are about to try a criminal case entitled State of Georgia versus Colin Gray. The defendant, Colin Gray, has been indicted by the grand jury of Barrow County in an indictment that I'm going to summarize to you now. I want you to understand, you will have a copy of the indictment with you during jury deliberations. That document is what controls as far as the language of the charges go. I'm summarizing it now to avoid reading all 29 counts. But you will have it with you in the jury room and understand that that is what is the controlling document regarding the charges, not what I say right now. All of the offenses are alleged to have occurred in Barrow County, Georgia on or about September 4th of 2024. Understand that to all of the charges, Mr. Gray has entered a not guilty plea, that he's presumed innocent, as I told you during jury selection. He is charged with 2 counts of murder in the second degree. It being alleged that irrespective of malice, he did cause the death of Christian Angulo and Mason Skirmerhorn, human beings, while in the commission of cruelty to children in the second degree, as alleged in counts 2 and 4 of this indictment. He is charged with 2 counts of involuntary manslaughter. It being alleged while in the commission of an unlawful act, reckless conduct, as alleged in counts 6 and 8 of this indictment, he did cause the death of Richard Aspinwall and Anna Christina Jeremy, human beings, without any intention to do so. He is charged with 2 counts of cruelty to children in the 2nd degree, being alleged that he did, with criminal negligence, cause Christian Angulo and Mason Skirmerhorn, children under the age of 18 years, cruel and excessive physical pain by consciously disregarding the substantial and unjustifiable risk that his act of allowing Colin Gray, a minor over whom he had custodial responsibility, access to a firearm and ammunition after receiving sufficient warning that Colin Gray would harm and endanger the bodily safety of another, and thereafter Colin Gray did shoot said children with said firearm. He was charged with 3 counts of cruelty to children in the 2nd degree, being alleged that he did, with criminal negligence, cause Melanie Delira Castaneda, Natalie Griffith, and Taylor Jones, children under the age of 18 years, cruel and excessive physical and mental pain by consciously disregarding the substantial and unjustifiable risk that his act of allowing Colin Gray, a minor over whom he had custodial responsibility, access to a firearm and ammunition after receiving sufficient warning that Colin Gray would harm and endanger the bodily safety of another, and thereafter Colin Gray did shoot said children with said firearm. He's charged with 3 counts of cruelty to children in the 2nd degree, it being alleged he did, with criminal negligence, cause Jackson Beaver, Ronaldo Vega, and Nautica Walton, children under the age of 18 years, cruel and excessive physical and mental pain by consciously disregarding a substantial and unjustifiable risk that his act of allowing Colin Gray, a minor over whom he had custodial responsibility, access to a firearm and ammunition after receiving sufficient warning that Colin Gray would harm and endanger the bodily safety of another, and thereafter Colin Gray did discharge a firearm multiple times inside the classroom occupied by said children. He is charged with 11 counts of cruelty to children in the 2nd degree, it being alleged that he did, with criminal negligence, cause Landon Adams, Hayden Bowen, Jalen Brady, Michaela Brown, William Carricker, Marquez Coleman, Kendez Lawrence, Martin Moreno Galdamez, Tyler Moon, Ariana Norman, and Brittany Rubio, children under the age of 18 years, cruel and excessive mental pain by consciously disregarding the substantial and unjustifiable risk that his act of allowing Colin Gray, a minor over whom he had custodial responsibility, access to a firearm and ammunition after receiving sufficient warning that Colin Gray would harm and endanger the bodily safety of another, and thereafter Colin Gray did discharge a firearm multiple times inside a classroom occupied by said children. He is charged with 1 count of cruelty to children in the 2nd degree, it being alleged that he did, with criminal negligence, cause Zane Zinni, a child under the age of 18 years, cruel and excessive mental pain by consciously disregarding the substantial and unjustifiable risk that his act of allowing Colin Gray, a minor over whom he had custodial responsibility, access to a firearm and ammunition after receiving sufficient warning that Colin Gray would harm and endanger the bodily safety of another, and thereafter Colin Gray did point said firearm at said child. He's charged with 2 counts of reckless conduct, being alleged he did unlawfully endanger the bodily safety of Stephen Edwards and Cassandra Ryan by consciously disregarding the substantial and unjustifiable risk that his act of allowing Colin Gray, a minor over whom he had custodial responsibility, access to a firearm and ammunition after receiving sufficient warning that Colin Gray would endanger the bodily safety of another, and thereafter Colin Gray did discharge a firearm multiple times inside a classroom occupied by said victim, said disregard constituting a gross deviation from the standard of care which a reasonable person would exercise in the situation. And he is charged with 3 counts of reckless conduct, being alleged he did unlawfully endanger the bodily safety of Richard Aspinwall, Anna Christina Hirami, and David Phoenix by consciously disregarding the substantial and unjustifiable risk that his act of allowing Colin Gray, a minor over whom he had custodial responsibility, access to a firearm and ammunition after receiving sufficient warning that Colin Gray would endanger the bodily safety of another, and thereafter Colin Gray did shoot said victims, said disregard constituting a gross deviation from the standard of care which a reasonable person would exercise in the situation. Now, to that indictment, the defendant has pled not guilty and he denies each and every allegation therein. This is what forms the issue that you've been selected, sworn, and impaneled to try. Before we begin the trial, I'm giving you these preliminary instructions on the fundamental principles of criminal law. I will also instruct you on the role of the judge, the jury, and the lawyers, and give you an overview of the trial procedure. So the defendant is charged in the indictment with crimes that are violations of certain laws of the state of Georgia. I want to emphasize to you that the indictment, including all of the counts therein, and the plea of not guilty are the legal procedures by which these criminal charges are brought against the defendant. The charges and plea of not guilty are not evidence of guilt, and you should not consider them as evidence for implication of guilt in any crime whatsoever. This defendant is presumed to be innocent. The defendant enters upon the trial of this case with a presumption of innocence in his favor, and this presumption remains with the defendant unless and until it is overcome by the state with evidence that is sufficient to convince you beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant is guilty of a crime or crimes charged. No person shall be convicted of any crime unless and until each element of the crime is proven beyond a reasonable doubt. The burden of proof rests upon the state to prove every material allegation of the indictment and every essential element of the crimes charged beyond a reasonable doubt. However, the state is not required to prove the guilt of the accused beyond all doubt or to a mathematical certainty. A reasonable doubt means just what it says. It is a doubt of a fair-minded juror, impartial juror, honestly seeking the truth. It is a doubt based upon common sense and reason. It does not mean a vague or arbitrary doubt, but it is a doubt for which a reason can be given, arising from a consideration of the evidence or a lack of evidence, a conflict in the evidence, or any combination of these. There is no burden of proof upon the defendant whatsoever, and the burden never shifts to the defendant to prove his innocence. If, after giving consideration to all of the facts and circumstances of this case, your minds are wavering, unsettled, or unsatisfied, then that is a doubt of the law, and you must acquit the defendant. But if no doubt exists in your minds about the guilt of the accused, then you would be authorized to convict the defendant. If the state fails to prove the defendant's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, it would be your duty to acquit the defendant. Under our system, it is my duty as the trial judge to determine the law that applies to this case and to instruct you, the jury, on the specific rules of law that you must apply to the facts in arriving at a verdict. I'm giving you some of these instructions now. I will give you more detailed instructions after the evidence has been presented and the lawyers have made their closing arguments. During the trial, I may be called upon to rule on motions or objections to evidence. Nothing I say in making these rulings or at any time during the trial is evidence and should not be considered as an indication that I have any leaning in this case whatsoever. My only interest in this case is to see that it is fairly tried according to the laws and the Constitution of the state of Georgia and the Constitution of the United States. As expected, the lawyers serve as advocates for their clients and are duty-bound to represent their clients to the best of their ability. The lawyers also serve as officers of this court, and as such, they are bound to follow applicable laws, trial procedure, and rules of evidence during the trial. If at any time the lawyers believe that any law, procedure, or rule of evidence is being violated, they may make motions regarding the conduct of the trial or objections to the admission of the evidence. In making these motions or objections, the lawyers are simply seeking to fulfill their duties to their clients and to the court. Sometimes these motions or objections may require the court to consider outside your presence the questions raised, and you will be excused to the jury room. We'll try to minimize the number and length of these interruptions and ask for your patience in that regard. Ladies and gentlemen, trial procedure in a criminal trial is generally as follows. First, the attorneys for both sides have the opportunity to make what's called an opening statement. This opening statement is not evidence. Remember that what the lawyers say is not evidence, but it's a preview or an outline of what they expect the evidence to be. Following the opening statements, the evidence will be presented. Evidence can be in the form of testimony given by witnesses or physical evidence that will be labeled with exhibit numbers for identification. After the presentation of all the evidence, the attorneys have the opportunity to make what's called the closing argument or summation. At that time, the attorneys may suggest which laws are applicable and how they should be considered in light of the evidence, and point out to you certain parts of the evidence that they think are favorable to their position. The goal of a closing argument is to persuade you to decide the case in their favor. Following the closing arguments, I'll charge you more specifically on the law that applies to this case. I'll then ask you to retire to the jury room to deliberate and reach a verdict. If you, the jury, have a role, it is your duty to determine the facts of the case and to apply the law to those facts. I'll instruct you on the laws that apply to this case, but you must determine the facts from the evidence. Evidence, by definition, is the means by which any fact and issue is established or disproved. Evidence consists of two things, testimony and exhibits. Testimony is the testimony that you will hear under oath from those who take the witness stand. Exhibits are those documents, photographs, or other physical items of evidence that are admitted into evidence. Ladies and gentlemen, the object of the trial is to discover the truth. During the trial, the admission of evidence will be governed by certain rules of evidence. Those rules were established with one prominent purpose in mind, and that purpose is the discovery of truth. Consequently, the rules of evidence seek to assure that only the best and highest evidence is admitted for your consideration. During the trial, the attorneys have a right to object to the admission of evidence if they believe its admission would violate a rule of evidence. I will admit or exclude the evidence according to those rules. If I overrule an objection, this means you are allowed to consider the evidence being offered. On the other hand, if I sustain an objection, this means that you may not consider the evidence being offered. You should consider only that testimony and only those exhibits that are admitted. And you should draw no inferences and make no assumptions about the evidence objected to if the objection was sustained. In the event that you hear or see inadmissible evidence before an objection can be made and ruled upon, if the objection is sustained, I would instruct you to disregard it, and you should disregard that evidence entirely in your deliberations and in reaching your verdict. You, the jury, must determine the credibility and believability of the witnesses. It is for you to determine which witness or witnesses you will believe and which witness or witnesses you will not believe if there are some whom you do not believe. In determining the credibility or believability of witnesses, you may consider all of the facts and circumstances of the case, the manner in which the witnesses testify, their interest or lack of interest in the case, their means and opportunity for knowing the facts about which they testify, the nature of the facts about which they testify, the probability or improbability of their testimony, and the occurrences about which they testify. You may also consider their personal credibility insofar as it may appear to you from the trial of the case. As the fact finder, it is for you alone to determine what testimony you will believe and what testimony you do not believe. Now, it's important that you pay close attention to the evidence as it is presented during the trial. If at any time you are unable to hear or see evidence being presented, or if you're suffering from any discomfort that diverts your attention, please feel free to inform me and we'll do whatever is necessary to assure that you're able to hear and see the evidence being presented and to give it your undivided attention. If you are in need of a recess at any time, please raise your hand and let us know. We'll take a break. It's vitally important that you're as comfortable as possible so that you can focus on the evidence as it's being presented. It's important that you view this evidence with an open mind at all times and reach no final conclusions until the trial is over. Do not jump to conclusions before all of the evidence is presented. Also remember that during the course of the trial, it would be improper for you to discuss this case with anyone or to allow anyone to discuss the case with you or in your presence or hearing. This applies even to discussions amongst yourself in the jury room or elsewhere before actual deliberations begin at the end of the trial. Now, the bailiffs have been asked to provide you with pencils and notepads for your use during trial. You may take notes, but you are not required to do so. If you decide to take notes, please remember that note-taking should not divert you from paying full attention to the evidence and evaluating witness credibility. Your observation of the witnesses during their testimony can be vital to your determination of the believability of their testimony. The notes that you take are for your use only and are not to be shared with anyone until you begin deliberations with your fellow jurors. Notes are not evidence, they are only memory aids and should not take precedence over your recollection. It's the duty of each juror to recall the evidence, and while you may consider another juror's notes to refresh your memory, you should rely on your own recollection of the proceedings. Do not be influenced by the notes of other jurors unless their notes help you in determining your own independent recollection. Notes are not entitled to any greater weight than the recollection or impression of each juror as to what the evidence may have been. After the trial is over, the notes will be collected and destroyed. I instruct you, ladies and gentlemen, that you must decide this case for yourself solely on the testimony you hear from the witness stand and the exhibits that are admitted into evidence. So understand you are not to visit any scenes that may be depicted by the evidence. You're not to use the internet or the books for any reason, to do any research for your deliberations. I've implored you during jury selection, I'm going to say it again, pretend like it's 1980 to the best that you can. Stay off the internet, stay off of social media. Do not discuss this case with anyone other than your fellow jurors during deliberations. Now, the last thing I want to say is go with the flow. And I say that so that you'll be less frustrated. There will be times during the trial where the attorneys want to talk about something outside of your presence, and sometimes that requires me sending you to the jury room. Sometimes we'll take a break, and I'll say it's a 10-minute break, and you're still sitting in the jury room 20 minutes later wondering what's going on. Something's come up that we need to discuss outside of your presence. You may be at your lunch break, and I tell you it's going to be an hour, and it turns into an hour and 20 minutes. We're not wasting time. We're talking about things that we can't do in front of you. You may be on a recess, come into the courtroom, and something comes up, and I've got to send you right back out. I just tell you this to set an expectation. The trials are fluid, and I want you to just, to the best of your ability, go with the flow. Understand that things are going to come up that I have not heard before. I have not heard all the evidence in this case. I've heard very little of it. And sometimes I'm going to need to inquire with the lawyers just so I can speak freely with y'all outside the court. Okay? And with that, I'm going to turn it over to the attorneys for opening statements, starting with the state. Thank you.
All right, so there we have it. That actually, I'm glad that we went back and listened to that because it did give a little more clarity as to what the charges entailed. And, you know, those words that we were kind of throwing out there: malicious, deliberate, disregard, I said malicious. There was one more, I think, negligence. So this is going to be interesting because, I mean, I'm going to pretend I'm a juror and I'm going to just listen to everything and try, you know, I'm going to try to keep an open mind, even though I know a lot about this case. There may be something that is presented that changes my mind. So we will get into the witness testimony. And then, as I said, once they break for lunch, we will break for lunch. And then I will come back with an entirely new live stream. All right, here we go.
Mr. Hobbs in his opening made several references to things Colt was going to say. We would object any hearsay.
Go ahead, Chief Hobbs.
No, that's my understanding of the law. We won't bring any hearsay from Colt. There are some text messages we think can be authenticated that we wouldn't be asking to get into, but we'll get that when it comes up.
All right. Otherwise, ready?
Yes, sir.
All right, bring the jury in.
Yes, sir.
Black. Right, now, was my back problem guy gonna? Okay, there you go.
I'm good on the end.
All right, state calls first witness.
The state calls Lieutenant Barry Chandler. Please raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
You have a seat. Will you go ahead and introduce yourself to the jury?
My name is Barry Chandler.
And what do you do?
I'm a lieutenant with the Barrow County Sheriff's Office.
And what role do you currently have with the Barrow County Sheriff's Office?
Currently, I'm assigned as the supervisor over the training unit.
Were you in that same role in September of 2024?
Yes, ma'am.
Prior to becoming lieutenant over training, can you just briefly describe what roles you've had at the Sheriff's Office?
Yes, ma'am. So I started my career in the jail in 2003. I was a court services deputy, patrol deputy, answering calls for service and things like that. I was a school resource officer for about 6 years. And then prior to being promoted to lieutenant, I was an investigator for 7 years. I worked 6 years in crimes against persons.
So in your capacity as a school resource officer, did you become familiar with the various schools in Barrow County?
Yes, ma'am.
And what different high schools are there in Barrow County?
We have Winder Barrow High School, Apalachee High School, and the Barrow Arts and Science Academy, BASNA.
And where is Apalachee High School located?
Off of Heyman Morris Road.
And obviously, is that in Barrow County?
Yes, ma'am, in Barrow County.
And approximately how many students go to Apalachee High School?
Around 2,000.
In your capacity as the lieutenant over training, did you coordinate any trainings related to active shooters in 2024?
Yes, ma'am.
And when and where did you do that?
We did several in 2024. We started off at Old County Line Elementary School. We worked at CFIT, which is the Center for Innovative Teaching. And it all sort of culminated at Russell Middle School on March 14th of 2024.
And can you tell us about the training that you did on March 14th at Russell Middle School?
Yes, ma'am. So generally, active shooter training is designed for us to teach our deputies and law enforcement to rapidly enter a structure, to immediately find the person that is shooting and then stop them from shooting. So the training that we did prior to the March 14th drill at Russell was very focused on that. We also included implementing what are called rescue task forces. So rescue task forces are members from fire and EMS who can get into the school quickly. And with security provided by law enforcement, they can start rendering aid to victims. So that was our big push. And the March 14th drill specifically was designed to do it was what we refer to as a full scale exercise. Meaning we had many representatives from almost every public safety agency in the county. The Sheriff's Office participated, the Winder Police Department, Barrow County Fire and EMS, Winder Fire Department, the school systems, our 911 center, GEMA had a representative, the Georgia Emergency Management Agency. So we had a lot of folks that came together because our goal with the full scale exercise was to make something as realistic as we could, to give our deputies the ability to respond to the most real life environment they could. The school system was great. They included, they had teachers that were there that volunteered. The administrators were there. We used cadets, explorers from the Sheriff's Office and the fire department as role players. But we tried to make it real, essentially was what we tried to do.
And what was the purpose of having a training that included fire and EMS as well as law enforcement?
The purpose ended up being sort of our motto over the course of that training and honestly since. And the purpose was to stop the killing and stop the dying. That's the two goals that we have when we respond to active shooters. Stop the killing, meaning stop the shooter from actively killing people, and then stop the dying. We have to render aid and help people that have been injured.
Now I'm going to draw your attention to September 4th of 2024. What were you doing that day?
That morning, I was at our gun range. I was helping an independent film crew set up some things out there.
As part of your role as lieutenant over training, are you also in charge of the gun range?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. While you were at the gun range, did you receive any notification that there was an emergency at Apalachee High School?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
And how did you receive that notification?
Through the Centegix alert system. It's an app that's on our cell phones.
When was Centegix implemented?
So it was implemented in early 2024. The school system had it implemented in the schools, in the buildings, because it's software, but it also, there are connections that had to be made inside the building to give like alerts, red flashing lights, connections to the intercoms, things like that. So the school system had Centegix in April. Centegix was connected to our 911 center over the summer, and then by August, we at the sheriff's office all had access to the app.
Can you just kind of describe for the jury how that system works?
Sure. So Centegix, again, it's a system that essentially initiates and alerts law enforcement and fire and EMS as well of any emergency at a school. So for example, when the Centegix button is pressed, it puts the school into hard lockdown. So exterior doors are locked. That lets the teachers know that they need to get into their classrooms, make sure the doors are locked, and that their lights are turned off and the kids are hidden out of sight. So that's essentially what it does. It does that, and then it lets the teachers know, hey, you need to go into hard lockdown. All of the smart screens that are in the classrooms, whatever they're doing on those, they're taking over, and then the warning flashes on the screen that they're in hard lockdown, and there's an audible tone that goes throughout the school, and like I said, red flashing lights. As
far as Centegix, how many times does someone have to push the button for it to go into hard lockdown?
8 rapid presses in order for Centegix to go into hard lockdown.
So does that ensure there aren't any accidental presses that ultimately end in?
Generally, yeah. It is a heavier number. We still have the occasional accidental activation, but having a number like 8 presses makes it a little less common, I guess.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm going to show you.
Yes, sir.
I'm going to show you what states Exhibit 1. Do you recognize that?
Yes, ma'am.
What do you recognize that as?
This is it's basically a screenshot of Apalachee High School. It's an overview, but it's from the Centegix app.
Okay. And is it a fair and accurate copy of the overview of Apalachee from the Centegix app?
Yes, ma'am.
You're right. This time I'd like to introduce an evidence states Exhibit 1.
No objection. I assume they're demonstrative. Your Honor, I won't go back to the jury.
I think that's something we can discuss later.
I'll admit it into evidence if we want to decide later whether it goes out.
We could display that. Can we have access, Your Honor?
Sorry.
It's okay.
I pushed it and said, he's waiting.
Okay. So does this show on your phone when there's an emergency?
Yes, ma'am. So it pops up like a notification badge, right? Saying hard lockdown, and then it tells you the school. And then once you open the app, you can pull up this map.
And does it tell you where specifically the emergency notification came from?
Yes, ma'am.
So kind of going back to September 4th of 2024, when you pulled up this screen, what did you see?
So initially, when I heard the alerts going off on my phone, I looked at it, and then I didn't immediately go to this screen because we had several alerts coming out. Earlier that morning, we'd actually had a test that was done at Bethlehem Elementary. So we got the same alert. The alert, there was a hard lockdown, and then they came over the radio and said, "Hey, it was just a test." So initially, I look at it and then was like, "I wonder if they're having a test in Apalachee." And then the second alert comes through, and then the third. So instead of opening the app immediately, I went to my truck and I got on the radio and turned the radio on, my police radio. I don't recall if I ever opened up the map. I do recall seeing Miss Lancaster's room. I just saw the alert from Miss Lancaster's room.
And so at the initial time that you received this emergency notification, did you know what was going on at Apalachee?
No, ma'am, not initially.
So you indicated that you got in your truck and turn on the radio. And what
Correct.
happened when you turn on your radio?
Just seconds after I turned my radio on, I heard Deputy Sergeant Chase Boyd say active shooter across the radio.
I have in my hand State Exhibit 2. It's on a hard drive and it's the radio traffic from September 4th. Have you had an opportunity to review that radio traffic?
Yes, ma'am.
Is it a fair and accurate recording of what you heard on September 4th?
It is.
At this time, I'm going to introduce into evidence State Exhibit 2 and publish for the jury, Your Honor.
No objection.
All right, two's admitted, and you can publish it.
You have traffic? Sure. Active shooter.
That's an active shooter at Apalachee High School.
And you said it was from Deputy Boyd, and who is that?
Sergeant Boyd he's a supervisor with the SRO division. He's one of their immediate supervisors.
So when you heard that, what did you do?
I immediately I had to, so being at the range and being in our ammunition house, I didn't have my standard uniform on. So I threw on my gun, jumped in my truck, and I went to Apalachee as fast as I could.
About how far from Apalachee were you?
Close to 5 miles.
Do you remember approximately what time you arrived?
Around 10:30.
And I'm going to show you what's been marked as State Exhibits 3.1, 3.2, and 3.3. Do you recognize those?
Yes, ma'am.
And what do you recognize those as?
They're overviews of Apalachee High School. They show rooms, room numbers, so essentially school maps.
And just for the record, is 3.1 a full map of the high school?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And is 3.2 a partial map of the high school?
Yes, ma'am, it is.
Okay. And I'm going to have you look over to your left.
Okay.
Is that also 3.2 right there?
Yes, ma'am.
And then is 3.3 an overview, like a street view from Google Maps?
Yes, ma'am, it is.
Your Honor, this time I'd like to introduce into evidence State Exhibits 3.1, 3.2, and 3.3.
Defense?
Same objection. Good. Just as far as going.
Whether it's demonstrative or not, okay.
Right.
All right. 3.1, 3.2, and 3.3 are all admitted.
All right. Now we're going to start with 3.1, if we could display that for the jury. All right. So is this the full map?
Yes, ma'am, it is.
Can you, and I'm going to hand you this because
Okay.
you need it. Can you show us on there where you went when you arrived?
And so I entered the school through the front door. Front door is going to be here. I made my way to the main atrium, and then from the main atrium, I moved down F Hall until it intersected with J Hall. Once it intersected with J Hall, I made my way. So I could see a large law enforcement presence, obviously, at this point. So I moved down towards the end of J Hall, and that's where I came into contact with Sergeant Boyd, and he had the shooter in custody.
Okay. And when you arrived, who else was there?
A lot of folks. When I initially went through the front door, I saw Sergeant Maxwell. I remember seeing one of our investigators, and so but when I made my initial approach, until I got to the atrium, I think I was by myself.
And were EMS already there as well?
Yes, they had just gotten there.
And for you, what was your purpose of making entry?
To make sure that the shooter was, number one, secured, to make sure that we didn't have any other shooters in the school, and then to begin to render aid and work towards the bigger picture of securing the entire school.
Were the skills that y'all learned in March utilized that day?
Oh, yes, ma'am.
And how so?
So a lot of the people that we spoke to after the event said that, it's extremely stressful. I can't put into words how different the actual event is than all the training that we've done over the years. And we've done it since, I've been at the sheriff's office since 2003. And 2004, we did an active shooter drill at Apalachee High School. So the words can't put into perspective the amount of stress. But most of the guys that I talked to, they were like, it just felt like training.
And Judge, we're going to object to most of the guys that you talked to and what they may have said. In a year or so.
Just describe it from your perspective.
I'll sustain the objection.
Thank you.
It made it more where it was like it was something that they had seen before, which is not very common. It was something that we needed to do for us for the deputies.
And what was the result of the coordinated response by EMS and law enforcement that day?
So the result was we were able to fully secure the school. Every patient that was injured that could have been saved was saved. We refer to it as we had 0 preventable deaths, which was unheard of in active shooter scenarios up until September 4th.
You can have a seat.
Okay.
I won't have you do anything
That's
on
all right.
that for a little bit. After you made entry and went to the end of J Hall and observed that the shooter was in custody, what did you do after that?
After making sure that the shooter was in custody, I got a team of deputies and we began moving down. So sort of, again, looking at the big picture, seeing where people were at, realizing where we needed resources. It didn't seem like anybody was fully down F Hall. So I took a team of deputies down F Hall and we began making sure that the classrooms that there weren't any other injured people in the classrooms, again, that there wasn't another shooter, and then just securing those areas.
And as you were securing them, were y'all also evacuating students?
Not initially, but fairly soon after we started clearing. The evacuation process didn't take too long to get to.
And I'm going to go ahead and bring up State Exhibit 3.3 behind you, which is the Google overview. So can you, and I think I lied, you are going to look at the map real quick. Can you show us on there where the school is and just kind of orient the jury to what we're looking at?
Yes, ma'am. So Hayman Morris Road, this is Apalachee High School. The front door is right here. And then you have the rear parking lot where the buses go, and then the football field. And the football field is surrounded by a chain link fence.
And when y'all evacuated the students, where did y'all ultimately evacuate them to?
To the football field.
And when parents arrived to come find their children, were they eventually allowed to go to the football field as well?
Yes, ma'am, they were.
Approximately how many law enforcement officers responded to Apalachee High School that day?
I believe that the number was close to 400, if not a little more.
And how many different agencies, if you know?
There were 56 that we made note of.
I'm going to go back to when you were in the school. Did you observe any dust-like substance present in the school when you were clearing it?
Yes, ma'am.
And where was it located?
So I noticed it the closer I got to J Hall. As I was going down F Hall, I noticed it as I was getting towards J Hall.
And had you had experience with that kind of dust before?
Yes, ma'am, years ago.
Okay. And based on that, your training and experience, where did that dust originate from?
I almost immediately recognized that it was from the ceiling tiles. The concussion from the gunshot caused the dust from the ceiling tiles to start to fall and settle. In 2008, we had done an active shooter drill at Old County Line Elementary School, and I was picked to be the suspect, the shooter. I was given a blank gun, so it doesn't fire real projectiles, just really loud and puts out the flash. And they put me in a bathroom, and when they gave me the signal, I shot, and the dust fell down from the ceiling tiles, and it created something very similar to what I saw at Apalachee.
And in your capacity as lieutenant over training, have you had an opportunity to review the surveillance videos from September 4th?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. In reviewing it, did you see the dust come from the ceiling tiles like you just described?
Yes, ma'am.
What was your purpose in reviewing that surveillance video?
Just to review the actions of our first responders, of the deputies, of fire and EMS, and to learn if what we did well, what we could have done differently, and then to implement that into training.
After watching that video, did you become aware of the path that the shooter took on September 4th?
Yes, ma'am.
At this time, I'd like you to go through that path for the jury,
Okay.
and if you could use the large map over there.
Yeah.
And I'd like to start with the shooter's first period class. What class was he in?
So for first period, he was in Miss Harris's class, and that was 1.515. It's going to be located right here.
And are you familiar with what time first period class is?
Yes, ma'am. So he got to class around 8:01, and class starts at 8:15.
Okay. And are you familiar with what time it ends approximately?
Yeah, it ends at 9:38.
After he left first period class, where did he go for second period?
So he leaves first period, and then he goes to Miss Catherine Greer's room on J Hall, room 2.151, and that was where that was second period. That's where he went next.
And what time does that class start?
9:45.
At some point, did he leave Miss Greer's class?
He did. He left her class at around 9:54.
And where did he go?
He went to the restroom.
Can you show which restroom he went to?
Yes, ma'am. Men's restroom, J Hall, just a short distance from Miss Greer's class.
And approximately when did he leave the restroom?
At 10:21.
After he left the restroom, where did he go?
He went back towards Miss Greer's class. So he had left Miss Greer's class. He had his book bag with him that we hopefully learned how to gun in it. So when he exits the men's bathroom, he's got the book bag. At some point, he drops the book bag, so he just has his gun, and he goes back to Miss Greer's classroom.
And was he able to get into that room?
No,
Where did he go after that?
he went immediately next door. He went to Miss Ryan and Coach Edwards' classroom, which is 2.152.
And what happened in that classroom?
The door to that classroom was open, slightly open, just a little bit, and he began firing numerous rounds into that classroom.
And was anyone injured or killed in that classroom?
Yes, ma'am. Several students were injured. Christian Angula was killed in that classroom.
After he left Miss Ryan's classroom, where did he go?
So after he shot here, thankfully, as unfortunately as Christian was, after Christian had been shot, he used his foot to close the door. So he restricted access to the shooter after that. The shooter moved back down the hall towards the restrooms that he had come from. And he ultimately got to this intersection as he's moving down the hall in room 2.145, Miss Irmy. She was in that room, Christina Irmy. She opened the door to see what was going on. She looked out briefly, and he shot her.
And did she survive?
No, ma'am, she didn't.
After he shot Miss Irmy, what did he do?
So after he shot Miss Irmy, he kept moving. He moved. He was continuing to move. He got to the intersection here of State Hall and J Hall. And while he was here, he saw Coach Aspinwall and Coach Phoenix, Ricky Aspinwall and David Phoenix, left their classrooms, which are two doors almost side by side. So they leave pretty much at the same time. And as soon as the shooter sees them coming out of those classrooms, as they're in the hall, he shoots them numerous times. Coach Aspinwall was killed, and Mr. Phoenix was hurt pretty bad.
And then after that, where does he go?
Continues moving down J Hall. The shooter gets to this area here, Jay and I, about the time that Mason Tremorhorn comes out of the bathroom. He sees Mason, he aims his rifle, he shoots several times, and he ultimately kills Mason.
And then what happened?
After he shoots Mason, he turns and aims down J Hall at a student that was quickly trying to run away from him. He was trying to run so fast that he was falling over himself. As soon as he aims this way, Deputy Brandon King and Sergeant Boyd made their way down F Hall. They actually came out at the intersection on J Hall so they could tell that there was, through the haze of the dust that had fallen, they could tell that somebody was down there. They heard the shots when he shot Mason, and then they immediately started giving loud verbal commands for him to drop his gun. And he immediately surrendered.
All right, Lieutenant Chandler, I don't have any further questions for you right now.
Cross. Good morning, Lieutenant.
Morning, sir.
I only have a few questions for you. How many entrances are to the high school?
Specifically, I'm not 100% sure exactly how many entrances. I can count them for you though, using the map that we have, if you'd like me to.
If you know, that would be great.
Okay, give me 1 second. So I'm going to go based off of mostly just the exterior doors. There are going to be some other doors that I might not be able to count. I would say upwards of, I'd say a little more than 15 exterior doors.
Okay. And are all of those doors secured when the kids first come in?
Yes, sir.
So other people can't get in from other places?
Correct. They're supposed to be, yes, sir.
So all the students have to go in through the front?
No, sir, not necessarily through the front. So basically, I think that the way they have it set up is car riders will go through the front, and then the bus riders will go through the back side of the school.
Okay. So you got actually two entrances?
Two main entrances, yes, sir.
And the entrance that Colt made would be from the bus?
Correct, yes, sir.
And do you know what time that bus arrived?
Slightly before 8.
Okay. You know how many children were on that bus with him?
No, sir, I don't.
I assume you didn't take possession of any evidence at all? Right?
No, sir. My role after the initial response was that I did supplement CID's efforts, but I didn't specifically collect evidence.
Okay. Nothing further.
Thank
you, Judge.
Based on crossing, you redirect?
No, Your Honor. May Lieutenant Chandler be excused?
Yes. All right, thank you, sir.
Yes, sir. Thanks.
Maybe about 20 minutes.
Okay. Go ahead.
The state calls Dr. Matt Thompson. If you want to go ahead and raise your right hand, do you swear or affirm any testimony you're about to give in the matter now pending before the court is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
All right, you can have a seat. And if you will start by just introducing yourself to the jury, and you can go ahead and tell us where you're employed.
My name is Matt Thompson. I'm the Deputy Superintendent for the Barrow County School System.
All right, and tell us a little bit about what that role entails.
It's a pretty broad job that entails a lot of different things. I have either direct or indirect supervision over, including technology, assessment, data, student records, student safety, support services, strategic planning, and a lot of other areas.
All right, and how long have you been in that role?
For this particular role, 4 years.
Okay. As part of that role, do you have access to the surveillance system for the Barrow County school system?
I do.
And does that specifically include surveillance video for Apalachee High School?
Yes, ma'am, it does.
Tell us a little bit about the surveillance system that Apalachee High School has.
System-wide, we have about 2,800 school and classroom cameras, about 800 bus cameras, about 4 per bus. For Apalachee specifically, we have 241 cameras spread out through the external parts of the school into the corridors, hallways, and including classroom cameras. And then they have however many buses delivered there on a given day. We have 4 cameras per bus.
Okay. And approximately how long has this surveillance system been in place?
We went with the particular server model that we're using in around 2015, so a little more than 10 years.
And does that record 24/7?
It depends on the camera. The classroom and hallway cameras record continuously 6 a.m. through 6 p.m. And then they have a mechanism that if there's a sensor that detects motion, it will start recording at any given point. The external security cameras and some of the key entrances record 24/7. And then the bus video records as long as the bus is actually cranked and engaged. It records continuously.
Gotcha. And do any of these videos have sound?
The bus videos do record sound. Teacher classroom videos do if the teacher chooses to engage it, if they're recording a lesson for their instructional purposes. But unless the teacher turns on the classroom cameras, they do not record sound, and the hallway security videos and the external do not record sound.
All right. So are you aware if any of the videos relevant to this case have sound recorded on them?
I'm not aware of it.
Okay.
Except possibly the bus video. I'm not 100% sure on that.
Okay. So the bus could go either way.
Bus could, yes.
Okay. And we'll start with the school proper. How is the surveillance video stored?
So the videos, when they're recording, are feeding data into a server. That server is organizing those. You can use our software to kind of query the server. We use a software called Video Insight. You can watch live streams, or you can also watch archived data. But that data feeds into the server room, where it's stored for 30 days, unless we choose to mark it for non-deletion, at which point it will be retained. Otherwise, it cycles over after 30 days.
Okay, and who has access to these videos, to the server?
The server room?
Yes.
That'd be anybody with a master key at the school, which would include school administrators. That would also include maintenance staff, a handful of IT staff, and then also a very small number of district staff, including myself.
Okay. And how can you yourself access these recordings?
We would never really have a reason to go to the server room. We just access those videos through the Video Insight platform, which is an installed app that's on our computers that we use we can watch again the live stream, or we can pull video clips out of that, or we can just review archival footage.
All right. And so this app on your computers, is it fair to assume that you said a very limited amount of people have access to that? Is that true for that app?
School administrators would have their own school. Beyond that, there's a small number of district staff who have full district access, but it's very small, fewer than 10 for most districts.
And is this the same system that's used for the buses in addition to the school system?
Buses are slightly different. They don't feed data live into a server. Theirs are recorded on a hard drive on the actual camera. So when we ask to review bus footage, we have to ask that the hard drive be actually pulled out of the camera and delivered. We can request that anytime we need to.
Okay. So on this hard drive, we have what have been marked as States Exhibits 4 through 28, showing the bus that Colin Gray took to the school on September 4th of 2024 and relevant video from Apalachee High School. Have you had the opportunity to review all these videos? And are they accurate copies of what was captured from the surveillance video that day?
Yes.
Were all these videos obtained directly either from the server at the school or the local servers on the bus?
That's correct.
And have they been materially changed or altered in any way?
They have not.
Judge, at this time, we attend States Exhibits 4 through 28, and I would note that States 22 is in two parts, so we've just marked that as 22.1 and 22.2.
All right, that's a reduction.
You're good.
All right, 4 through 28, inclusive of 22.1 and 22.2, we're all good.
All right, so we're going to be playing relevant portions of these videos at a later point in the trial, but what we're going to do with you right now is go through some clips from the exhibits just to orient the jury to the different views that these different cameras provide. We'll start with a clip from States Exhibit 4, which is the exterior of the school bus. And looking at this video, is that the video that you obtained relevant to this case or a clip from it? And is the timestamp and date accurate on this video?
They appear to be accurate, yes.
Okay. And where's that camera? I think it's relatively obvious, but where's the camera shooting from?
There's 4 cameras per bus. That would be the front mounted camera that's pointing at the front of the bus.
Okay. Moving on to a clip from States Exhibit 5. And is that the interior of the same school bus that we previously saw the exterior of?
That would be the camera that's pretty standard mounted behind the drive.
Okay, and once again, is the date and time stamp accurate on that video?
It appears to be, yes.
All right, now shifting to cameras at the school, we're next going to show a clip from States Exhibit 6. All right, and where is that camera showing from?
That is the bus rider entrance at the back of Apalachee High School.
All right, and I see we've got 2 date and timestamps, but they look to be exactly the same. Are those correct in
Those
these
would be
videos?
correct, yes.
Okay. Now, next we're going to jump over to a clip from States Exhibit 16. All right, so this one obviously looks a little different or significantly different from the other videos we're looking at. Can you just kind of explain what we're looking at here?
This is one of the classroom cameras. This is actually, I believe, in Miss Suzanne Harris's classroom. They're mounted at the center of the classroom, or not every classroom is perfectly square, so sometimes they're configured as close as we can get it, and they provide a fisheye view of the entire classroom. Some of the newer ones can be actually angled a little bit if a teacher wants to use them for instructional purposes. They typically are not done that much for that purpose, so this is typically the view you're going to get from a classroom camera, sort of the fishbowl view of the entire classroom.
Okay, and so are all the cameras inside the classrooms this style of camera?
Yes, there's not any that will look any different from this. As I said, you can sometimes angle them, but in this particular case, it's not angled, and I don't believe any of the footage is relevant September 4th were angled.
That was my next question. Thank you. And are there any other cameras that show the interior of these classrooms as part of the school surveillance system? Is the date and time stamp on this video correct?
It is, yes.
And just to kind of further orient the jury, in this video, can you tell us where the entrance to the classroom is?
It would be in the upper left-hand corner of the screen. You can see a sort of brown door. That would be the entrance to the classroom. And this is, like I said, this is a computer classroom, so there's rows of desktop stacks.
Okay, so that brown door with the little window on it, right? Okay. And next, we're going to pull up State 17 and show a clip from that. All right, and tell us what we're looking at here.
This is just a pretty standard example of one of the hallway surveillance cameras that's looking down a hallway. Actually, I'm not 100% sure which hallway that is. Likely K Hall would be my guess, but it's one of the. I recognize enough of the names to know that's one of the ones that feeds on J Hall.
Okay. And generally, these hallway cameras, where are they located throughout the hallways?
We try to strategically place them through the. These are very large schools, hundreds of thousands of square feet to cover, so there are going to inevitably be, particularly in the hallway surveillance cameras, some occasional blind spots or some places where you have a long view to see something, but we try to place them along strategic points in the hallway to get maximal coverage.
Okay. Is every square inch of every hallway covered by a camera?
No, ma'am. We unfortunately do have some blind spots occasionally.
Okay. And is there any video surveillance that specifically covers any part of the interior of any bathrooms?
No, for obvious student privacy reasons, we don't have any surveillance cameras within restrooms. We do try to typically have one facing the entrance or the exit to the restroom, but we don't place them inside.
Okay. And on this video, and I believe any hallway videos, I see we have two timestamps that are actually slightly different. Can you tell us which one is accurate?
So the upper left-hand corner is the camera's particular internal timer that is specific to the particular camera in use. Those can, unfortunately, due to connectivity issues, battery issues, those can be off. Those sometimes will lag what actual time. So when these are queried on the server, the bottom right is going to be the server time that is synced to national clocks and is the independently verifiable time. So in this particular case, anytime you see two timestamps, the one on the bottom right is going to be the accurate date and time.
Okay, so in this case, we're looking at these two times, and the accurate time is 9:39 a.m.
That would be correct. Yes, that would be the server time.
All right, thank you. Did you also review and recover surveillance footage from any dates besides September 4th related to this case?
Yes, ma'am. We also reviewed and pulled footage from August 26th and August 28th.
Okay. And again, we'll provide more relevant context and publish those videos through subsequent witnesses. But starting with August 26th, what were you generally looking for?
That was the last day Colt attended school prior to September 4th, and we were particularly interested in verifying that he spent the majority of that day in the counseling suite. So in this particular case, we pulled videos related to his first period class, his second period class, and then his moving into the counseling suite for the majority of the rest of the day.
And was that video recorded and stored in the same capacity as you previously described?
It was, yes.
And did the timestamp appear to be accurate, or in the case of any hallways, that bottom right timestamp appear to be accurate? With these videos from that date, did you combine multiple camera recordings of Colt related to him going to the counselor's office?
We did. It's a little clunky when you're trying to parse through a server. So
Sure.
a lot of times we'll create curated like pathway videos through a school. So in this particular case, we pulled sequential clips off of multiple cameras and sort of stitched them together using just very basic video software, just so that you have an unobstructed view of the student moving through the school. And we did that for the August 26th for Colt.
Okay, and other than putting those videos from different cameras into one file, were the videos changed or materially altered in any way?
They were not.
And Judge, again, we'll publish this at a later time, but at this time, we would tender State's Exhibit 29, which is also stored on this hard drive.
Okay.
And just to follow up on that a little bit, is there any surveillance video once you enter the counseling wing at Apalachee High School?
There isn't actually a unobstructed view of the entrance to the counseling suite. You can get almost there from the, you come off the K Hall, coming down from J Hall. You can see where individuals turn to go to the counseling suite. You can also see that off of other hallways, but you can't actually see anybody enter the counseling suite.
Okay, and was the thought there essentially also for privacy reasons?
Yeah, sometimes we've kind of gone back and forth over the years, but coverage versus trying to be a little more discreet with students who may have issues and they don't want to be picked up on camera. So in this particular case at Apalachee, we don't have a camera that shows the counseling suite entrance.
Okay. And shifting your focus to August 28th, which is the other date you referenced, were you looking for a specific person on that date at Apalachee High School?
We were, yes.
Okay, and who was that?
That would be Colt's grandmother, Miss Deborah. I think I had her name mispronounced all these years. It was Pommelhoofs or.
Okay, I believe Paul Hamus,
Paul Hamus, there we go.
but I think we will
She had
clarify later.
she had visited that day to meet with a counselor, discuss her concerns. So we pulled video showing both her entrance and her exit from Apalachee High School.
Okay, and again, did you combine the multiple camera recordings of her on that date into one file?
We did.
And other than putting them into one file, were they changed or materially altered in any way?
They were not altered in any way.
All right, and is that the video that we've marked as State's Exhibit 30 and put onto this hard drive, a fair and accurate depiction of what you pulled off as
It is.
cameras? And Judge, at this time, we would tender State's Exhibit 30 and again play it at a later time.
Okay. All right. 30 is admitted for not objection.
All right, now lastly, I'm going to show you what has been marked as State's Exhibit 31. And can you just identify what this is?
So this is Apalachee's bell schedule for 2024, 2025, specifically the fall semester. Apalachee's instructional day is tied into 4 main instructional periods with a shorter advisement period.
Okay, and before I make you talk through it twice, what I've handed you fair and accurate?
This is
Okay.
the accurate bell schedule from the fall of 2024.
Okay, and Judge, we go ahead and tender that as State's Exhibit 31. All right, and we'll go ahead and pull that up on the screen just so it's a little easier for people to follow. So yeah, if you'll just kind of talk us through what this shows.
Sure. So what this is going to be doing is, as I said, there's 4 instructional segments, and there's also an advisement period that is built in on certain days. So in this case, what this is showing is the beginning and ending of each class segment, and then the time students have to traverse to their next class before they would be considered target.
Okay. And nothing further from me. The defense may have a couple questions for you.
Cross, I just have one question.
Sir.
At that time, Apalachee High School did not have metal detectors.
That is correct, sir.
Thank you.
All right. Any excuse?
Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you, sir. And you're going to point out to you as you go to enter the jury room, before you turn in, there is a microwave sink there at the end.
All right, so it appears they are going to break for lunch. Yes, it does. All right, so that's interesting. The one thing that I will say, the cameras that they have such clarity to them. You know, we have cameras, we don't have cameras in the classrooms, but we do have them in alcoves in the hallway, things like that. And our cameras are not that clear. They're kind of grainy. You can see what's happening, but the clarity is not like these cameras at all. So it's interesting too that they had these, you know, these necklaces that the teachers wore that they could hit to start the lockdown procedure. Yet it doesn't seem like they had metal detectors at the school because this kid got through with an AR style rifle. I mean, you have all of these other security measures, yet no metal detectors. But you know, some places I feel like you don't, well, I can't say that anymore. Like, I feel like you have to, regardless of where you are, big town, small town, big city, small city, this can happen everywhere. Yeah, he did. So let me actually, I'm going to go back. Let me put this back up. So on the bus photo, let's see, where was it? Oh, nope, that's the classroom. Oh, here. So here he is getting on the bus. I mean, that is pretty weird because in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, if I was to bring a poster board or quote presentation to school, I would not put it in my backpack like that. I would just carry it by itself. I would roll it up, carry it by itself. That is very strange, right? So he's getting on the bus. So he sits down. He's right here. He's got the backpack on the ground. And it's just sticking up. And then here he is over here carrying his backpack, and then he's got like it cradled in his arm. So this is the rifle. It's just so weird. It's so weird. And I was hoping that they would show like another camera. They may later, but I was hoping they would show a camera of them entering the school, because I would like to see what did he do? It's just, and then I don't believe this is his classroom. I think this was just an example that they used, because I tried to see when they had shown it before. I didn't see anyone that would resemble Colt, but this is like, I mean, this is pretty amazing that they have cameras inside the classrooms. That is pretty cool. Pretty cool indeed. All right, y'all. So I am going to, actually, I'll go back and see how long he is giving them for lunch. I had initially had the next live scheduled for 1 p.m., but I don't believe they're going to be back by then. So I am going to reschedule it for, let's say it's 12:30. And I want to make sure I'm a little bit behind so that I can speed it up. So I'm going to reschedule it for, like, let's do 2:15. 2:15. I will change the time to. So thanks everybody for being here. I know there's a lot of people live right now, and this is probably one of the more boring topics, because apparently everyone and their brother is more concerned with someone's pregnancy than something going on in the world. So, well, I guess that is going on in the world, but more on that later. Because I do have a live scheduled for later. I might have something to say, depending on how long the rest of today is. I may or may not do that live stream. And that's why I put, I might have something to say, because it may not happen. So have a great rest of your day if I don't see you later. And if I do see you later, I will see you on the flip side.